everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy, and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading pages 143 to 160 of What We Found, or, well, the Gumdrop Angel, but this section's called What We Found. What did we find? I don't know. I don't remember reading this one. I really think the last story I ever read was Sergio's Lucky Day, because that one I did have some faint memories on. And then again, I could be wrong. I just don't know remember the intro, or this one. But yeah, so this one, we also are, on the, I want to say, oh, no, oh my goodness, I need to shut my mouth. I was about to say, I swear we're, like, close to the end. We have 4 more episodes, so, yeah. We have today's episode, and then we have episode 9, episode 10, episode 11. So, we're not done yet. We could be done soon, but we're not done yet. So, without further ado, considering we hit the 1 minute mark on the recording, let's begin. What we found. Hudson leaned his gangly 6 feet, 1 inch against the cracked brick archway just inside the newly constructed Fazbear's Fright horror attraction. The archway was only 2 weeks old, but it was made to look like a crumbling entrance to a place 30 plus years forgotten. Hudson watched his buddies, Barry and Dwayne, carrying the latest batch of Fazbear memorabilia for display in the endless halls of the rooms inside the building. The lobby was already piled high in open and unopened cardboard boxes, each stuffed with vintage finds from various Freddy's Fazbear's restaurants. Hudson was doing his best to stay away from the boxes, or not the boxes actually, but what was in the boxes. The management had dubbed them vintage finds, but as of the couple of days ago, Hudson was calling them something else. The boxes, as far as Hudson was concerned, were full of old creepy stuff. And it was old creepy stuff that gave Hudson the heebie-jeebies, because he didn't believe it was just stuff. No matter how much he tried to rationalize, the memorabilia made just the little hairs on the back of his neck stand up stiffer than the needles of Granny stuck in voodoo dolls. Hudson, think you could give us a hand? Barry had asked. Hudson's buddies were struggling to keep a stack of boxes upright, but Hudson didn't move. I'm not part of the construction and setup crew, I'm the guard. Dwayne spit on the linoleum floor. The disgusting blob of saliva landed right in the middle of one of the black squares, which was alternating with white squares to create a dizzying checkerboard pattern throughout the building. The floor gave Hudson a headache. The whole building was giving him a headache. How did something that had started so right now feel so wrong? I'm the guard, Dwayne mimicked the Hudson in a whiny sing-song voice. You hear that, baby, Barry? He thinks he's entitled or something. Hudson snorted. Yeah, right. I'm entitled to working double shifts, days and nights, and you guys get to work days. Wine, Dwayne said. This is the best job you've had in years. You said yourself the pay is great. Hudson nodded. That much was true, and he thought the job would have been more than great pay to offer, but ever since... No, now it's just a job with crap hours. And he's tired all the time. Sure, but sleep deprivation tends to make you stop caring about great pay. I have to have some perks of holding the short end of the stick. One of those perks is getting to stand here and watch you two sweat. Fine, be like that, Dwayne said, as he and Barry finally steadied up all the top box in the stack. Then, when that box fell, Barry managed to catch it. The box topped open and Barry grabbed it. A yellow furry arm popped out. Hudson stiffed. Oh man, how he hated those character parts. They were the worst part of the creepy old stuff for sure. Harry set down the box. Dwayne pulled off an arm, then he reached in and grabbed the second arm. Check this one out, he said. He held up a second arm and looked at it held. What the heck is that? Barry said. Think it's a cupcake, Dwayne said. Not a cupcake I want to eat, Barry said. Look at those teeth. Dwayne stared toward the Hudson with the 2 arms, pretending to be a fuzzy yellow armed zombie. He made guttural groaning sounds and he staggered across the room. Hudson held his ground and pretended to be bored, but the truth was he wanted to scream and run. His disembodied arms were bad enough, but the cupcake was just disturbing. Hudson pulled out his nightstick from the loop of his belt, then he made it he was going to have a sword fight with Dwayne's zombie. He thought about doing a pretty good job of acting playful and relaxed, and he hoped Dwayne didn't see the sheen of sweat on his forehead or the smell of pungent scent that was starting to emanate under his arms. Wait, was that smell his, or was it coming from the disembodied arms? Cut it out, you two, Barry had said. How old are you? 23, Dwayne said. Same as you. Aren't you having memory lapses in your old age? Then he laughed and turned his arms and opened the box. Barry and Dwayne left the building to return to the truck for another load. Hudson strolled nonchalantly down the hall until they were out of sight. Then he strode to the office, the real office. There, he went in and shut the lock and locked the door. Dropping into a cheap, wobbly desk chair in front of the bank of monitors, Hudson surveyed the building, starting with the fake office. Fazbear Frights was setting up to be a sort of expanded replica of Freddy Fazbear's restaurants. Not a true representation of any one of the actual old places. This attraction spliced together aspects of the infamous pizzerias with the murderous history. The office was one of the aspects. The place where hapless security guards like Hudson managed to miss seeing the tragedy as if unfold so many years ago. The fake office had already been decorated by the attraction's design team. They had done a good job of making the old room look old and dingy, mostly because there were people able to use salvaged derelict equipment original from the old pizzerias. Clunky monitors, dusty keyboards, bent filing cabinets, and the scratched desk that had been shoved into the room. They then covered those surfaces with piles of paper, wadded up trash, paper cups, and crooked old fan that squeaked as it ran. They even let loose a rat or two in the room. The rats apparently were pretty tame and had a place to stay, tucked into the vent in a wall where they didn't want to perform. But when they scurried around, they gave Hudson the willies. They figured out more than one girl would scream her head off when the rats appeared. Hudson had nearly screamed himself a couple times. He wasn't a fan of rats. And speaking of the vent, it was one of those small functional vents of the heating and cooling system, higher up on the wall. Huge, low-verge vent covers made it clear the vents behind them were massive. Clear, certainly large enough to accommodate a good-sized man, or something not so ordinary. Hudson, who had been tall but skinny, could have easily made a picnic inside one of those vents if he so inclined, which he wasn't. What in the heck were those big vents for? Hudson had asked that question, and he hadn't received an answer. That unsettled him. He didn't think the vents were for anything good. Hudson noticed movement in the monitors, and he leaned back in his chair to watch Barry and Dwayne carrying another load. Both men were laughing, and why shouldn't they laugh? Barry and Dwayne had it made. Unlike Hudson, they were good-looking, respected around town, and on the verge of going to be in Navy to train for a spot on the SEAL team. When Hudson and Barry and Dwayne were boys, they were the three musketeers, ready to take on the world, invincible, unstoppable. Hudson could remember the swashbuckling fights they had in their backyards, reenacting scenes from their favorite action movies. They had a care in the world. But as before, Hudson's dad died and the mom married Lewis, a ridiculous balding man who wore a plaid vest and smoked a pipe like he was giving a performance every time he took a puff from it. To this day, Hudson couldn't stand the smell of cherries because Lewis had the black cherry pipe tobacco. It was a horrible little man Hudson's mothers thought it would be a great idea to marry, would make Hudson's next 10 years a living hell. The day was crazy your mother said, "I do" to Lewis, was the day life started going, saying, "I don't" to Hudson. It was also the day when life's path that was the best friends started to diverge. Sure, all remained friends. They also had fake sword fights. They still hung out, but everything else changed. Barry and Dwayne did well in school, so their parents were proud of them, and they did well in sports, so they were popular with the other kids. While their stars were on the rise, Hudson began to screw up in class, a product of spending the night in fear of his stepfather was going to bust in his room and beat him just for the fun of it. Sore because of the near daily beatings, and malnourished because his mom started taking pills to get her through the day and therefore forgot to mandate things like grocery shop. Hudson couldn't get on the basketball or football team to save his life. Barry, whose red hair and freckles are always awkward when he was young, became an auburn-haired novelty to the cheerleaders and fans alike in his high school. Dwayne, who wore tight black shirts and show off his muscles, grew his black hair long enough to wear a glossy ponytail, was like walking catnip to girls. Even though Barry and Dwayne still tried to include Hudson, there was no place for him really in their world. So it went, year after year, until the night of the fire. And then, when he was and his troubles were over and the sun was finally going to rise again in his life, things got worse. And to have that happen again here in this new job, it wasn't fair. Patting on the office door jerked Hudson from his pathetic stroll down memory hell. He scrambled upright. "What?" he shouted. "We're gonna knock off and go to Charlie's for a sundae in 15 minutes," Gary called. "Coming with?" Hudson looked at his old Scrift watch. What would work? He got 6 hours off between shifts. Just enough time to get ice cream, go home, eat canned soup, then try and sleep for 4 hours. What a life. "Sure," he called. "Meet us out front." "Okay." Hudson sighed and stood. He had to do one more walkthrough before he passed the keys to Virgil, the old guy who covered for him when he went home. Hudson was pretty sure Virgil didn't do a thing but sleep while he was here. But Virgil wasn't Hudson's responsibility. Hudson just wanted to go do a good job on his shift so he could keep a better pay coming in. It wasn't like he had a lot of job options available. He thought it made him grind his teeth. "Thanks, Lewis," he muttered as he left the office. In the hallway, he took a deep breath and gave himself a little mental prep talk about what he had to do. This is not rocket science, he thought, nor is it an advance into enemy territory, a fight with deadly demons, or a descent into hell. It's just a tour through a building that was a lot of old creepy stuff. Then the goosebumps popped up in his forearms. He knew his usual pep talk had failed. No amount of reasonable assurances could make a dent in his new, utterly illogical fear of the place. Hudson had a hand in the nightstick and began whistling as he headed off into the office. He made sure to stay in the middle of the hall as he walked toward his least favorite part of the building. He stayed in the middle because the walls were hallway were already decorated. The entire interior of Fazbear Frights, although in a brand new building, had been made to look like a long abandoned place. Already dark and gloomy because it was nearly windowless, only the tiniest of windows were set up on high on the walls. The rooms and hallways looked ancient because the painters used all sort of weird techniques to create walls that looked dirty, mildewed, and cobweb covered. As if that wasn't bad enough, the designers had begun covering the malted walls with decayed, time-raveling bits of Fazbear's characters. Hanging in netting or from strings, sometimes nailed or impaled on the wall by knives, the hallway walls were lined with parts of old Fazbear character suits and animatronic parts like wires and joints. The main attractions were the whole costume heads of 3 characters, Freddy, Foxy, and Chica. These had positions and prominence in the hallway, but intersped with them were a cornucopia of character pieces, bunny ears, bear paws, chick feet, fox snouts, fuzzy purple bellies, matted furry brown legs. There were just a few of the spine-chilling slices of Fazbear lore that waited in the hallway to startle an unsuspecting passerby, or to grab them. Hudson had heard the designers were working on animating several of the hands. It wasn't functional yet, but once, Hudson's arms had brushed a purple bunny hand as it went by, and he'd beaten the hand into the ground before he realized it was pummeling into an intimate object. Luckily, he'd been able to reattach the hand to the wall, and apparently the designers hadn't remembered the hand wasn't as mangled when they'd put it up. Intersped with the characters' parts, images of pizza and children's drawings created a feeling of disorientation. So he did the thick, torn electric cables dangling from various parts of the ceiling. They looked like headless black snakes. They weren't live electric cables, of course. At least, Hudson assumed they weren't. It wasn't about a touch one to find out. At the end of the hall, Hudson sighed in relief when one set his shoulders before he stepped into the least favorite room in the building, in the dining room. He always checked his room first to get it out of the way. When he was hired, Hudson thought it was going to be a great gig. Yeah, the hours sucked, and not only was the pay great, but the job also came with a chance to get to know the lovely dark-haired petite girl who had known in the art school. And working there part-time with a design crew, Faith, she had a lovely name, was every bit as nice as she was pretty. And she was new in town. This meant she didn't know Hudson's history. It also meant that she didn't hate him on sight. That meant she actually laughed and joked with him as he flitted about, tucking the odd bits of animatronic parts with the old Fazbear plates and cups and party hats on long tables covered with torn purple tablecloths. As Hudson had helped Faith carry boxes all over the building, Faith had told him about her little sister and her dog, Goose, a spaniel, a bird dog that was afraid of geese. Hudson had loitered nearby while Faith painted sets all over the building, and she told him about her car, a Bettina, a classic MGB, and she spent her weekends working on. You know engines? He asked her, thinking more that she was a perfect woman. Do I know engines? Faith laughed. I could build you one. Hudson had grinned at her like an idiot. Faith laughed harder. I also like sports. She stopped laughing and smiled at him. I like you too, so why haven't you asked me out? After he blushed redder than the fake blood Faith was painting on the walls with, he asked her out. They went out for pizza and he thought he'd died and gone to heaven. But it was too good to be true. Hudson barely waited 5 hours before calling Faith to ask her out on the second date, but that was too long. In fact, 5 hours somehow, Faith hadn't heard about him. When she answered his call, she asked, Did you do it? All the good things he had about her drained from his body, like someone who turned a valve in the empty joy out of his big toe. He was pissed. Why did people always have to ask him that question? What do you think? He snapped. Faith was quiet for a few seconds, then she said, I think we should be more professional on the job. Hudson didn't even respond. He just hung up the phone. Ever since then, the job had gotten on his nerves, and so the building and everything in it. Now, as he stood in the dining room Faith had designed, he wondered at the ghostly jump scares and grisly reminders of the old crimes never quite forgotten. Where did she get off judging him for something he might or might not have done? Her mind was clearly twisted. How else could she have come up with the idea of a door opening and a hand reaching and drag a little boy out of sight? Hudson stared at the feature of the dining room, then ran his gaze all over the place, getting the table and the animatronic parts placed in the bizarre positions of the chairs. He studied the statues on the stage, created a look like she was an original animatronic animal performers that would just sing and entertain the whole Freddy Fazbear restaurants. The statues were, unlike the inspiration, completely non-functional. They could move on their own. So why did Hudson feel like they were watching him? Hudson left the dining room and went through the archway into the arcade area, although calling it an arcade area didn't really describe it. It looked more like an arcade junkyard. Hudson thought the management had exhumed every old, broken, dirty, cobweb-covered arcade game that used the landfill to bring them here. Hudson had been an actual worm crawl out of one of the pinball machines the day before. Beyond the game cemetery, a pile of rotting prizes cascaded out in the adjoining hall. Some of the prizes were morbidly wrapped packages, thick bloodstains and images of bones mixed with characters' eyes and teeth. Some, looking every bit as decrepit as the arcade games, were lying loose and broken, dusty counter or on the floor in piles. These prizes could no longer be called prizes. They were more like punishments. Maybe he's allowed to hand them out to kids who didn't behave themselves when the place opened. Hudson, eyeing the headless baby doll, grinned. He would find a sort of kick out of enjoyment in handing out hideous gifts to kids. Kids were nearly always mean to him. Maybe he could get a little payback. Chuckling, Hudson turned away from the prizes. He continued on his last security tour of the shift. He turned down his long hall and then headed up another. Took side steps into fake storage, wardrobe, and supply closets. Switched back to the replica of the pizzeria kitchen, complete with working industrial-sized ovens so big Hudson could fit inside them, until, at last, he completed his rounds. He ended up near the building's lobby. There, he stepped into the bathrooms, first the men's, then the women's. He tried to avoid glancing in any of the mirrors when he was inside the ridiculously bright red spaces. Hudson didn't like looking at himself. It wasn't that he looked bad. He figured he looked pretty normal. Short blonde hair, 3 days growth of pale beard, blue eyes, a wide mouth full of straight white teeth. These weren't features to be avoided, but to Hudson, these features added up to one thing he never wanted to face himself. Facing himself meant facing his past. He could only imagine that in snippets. Stepping out of the women's restroom, Hudson paused near the gift shop and sold an amazing assortment of Fazbear's merchandise. The store had a little of everything Fazbear related. The animatronics were no longer in one piece and functioning, but their images were displayed on hundreds of items. Visitors were going to be able to buy plush toys, action figures, clothing, accessories like Chica pear bands or Freddy hats. Housewares that included sheets and towels, artwork, sporting goods, and greeting cards based on the old characters. The gift shop was about 3/4 of the way stocked, and he knew it was supposed to be a bright and cheery place, in the red and yellow striped walls and its colorful posters of Fazbear characters, but he thought the rows and rows of little eyes and the plush toys and action figures weren't anything but cheerful. He thought the hundreds of small characters looked like they were lining up for an invasion of some kind. He didn't want to be around when the invasion came. He knew from horrific personal experience that toys could turn from fun to instruments of torture in a heartbeat. Of course, that required... "There you are," Dwayne called. "Are you ready to go?" Hudson looked out the front door of Fazbear's Fright and spotted his vigil getting out of his 30-year-old Ford sedan. Hudson nodded. Ready. He couldn't wait to get out of there, even if it was just for a few hours. Since they were kids, Hudson and his friends had been going to Charlie's, an old-fashioned soda fountain and ice cream parlor on the other side of town. Although they all should have outgrown the place a long time ago, they all liked going back from time to time. Not just for the ice cream, but for the matter of an innocent time they all left behind. Well, at least Hudson and Barry left behind. Hudson wasn't sure about Dwayne, and it was usually Dwayne's idea to come there. Hudson liked the place, and he didn't like going as far side of town. It meant that a bum of a ride from his friends, and he'd have to bum a ride back. It sucked having no car. It sucked having no life. Hudson and his friends arrived in a narrow, dimly lit, wood-paneled parlor, filled with red leather stools and booths. Hudson surveyed the scene. This place is starting to look a little like Fazbear Frights. It needs a good cleaning. Dwayne slid into a booth and stretched out his legs. Who cares? Doesn't this place make you feel like a kid again? Barry and Hudson squeezed in the opposite Dwayne. Barry snorted. It would make more than an ice cream parlor to make me feel like a kid. And you? What do you mean again? We're all still waiting on you to grow up. Dwayne grinned. You say that like it's a bad thing. A small ice cream parlor only had a couple other customers, teenage couple sharing a float. As they sucked on the concoction through a straw, they stared into each other's eyes. Hudson glanced at them. When he fixed his gaze on the other chrome jukebox on the black and white checkerboard floor at the far end of the room, it was way too similar to the one Fazbear Frights to suit Hudson. Zoning out, he reflected on his younger self, trying to remember the last time he felt truly happy. It was weird. He could perfectly envision his previous days in his mind, but he couldn't feel them. It was like watching some other kid's life in a movie screen in his head. Sighing, he drew a deep breath. The room smelled like a dust and a furniture polish. Only a hint of sweeter scents, like vanilla and cherries, managed to get through his nostrils. "Barkeep," Dwayne bellowed, "3 of your finest." The guy behind the soda fountain wasn't one they recognized. He was muscular and had a buzz cut. He rolled his eyes at Dwayne. Dwayne laughed. "Oh, all right. 3 chocolate sundaes. Hold the cherries." Hudson leaned back and half listened to Dwayne and Barry talk about the day while he watched the sundaes being made. Then the sundaes arrived. Dwayne and Barry argued over the bill. Hudson noticed neither of the friends asked him to pay, Not that they would have. After he paid his rent and the utilities this month, he had exactly $123.67 left to buy groceries and pay for a bus fare to and from his job. Better paid with a relative thing, he was still poor. If only the Navy had wanted him, like it had wanted his friends. Of course it hadn't. How could he hope to pass a physical? He had 2 fused discs in his spine, left over from when Lewis threw him against the wall after he mouthed off at him. The wrist that gave him fits. It didn't have been set right after Lewis crushed it under his boot because Hudson wet himself during the thunderstorm. Not to mention the nerve injury. It wasn't damaged goods, barely able to walk the spooky halls of Fazbear Frights. I shouldn't be eating this, Barry said, digging a spoon into whipped cream, chocolate syrup, and vanilla ice cream. Dinner at my grandparents' house this evening. Chicken fried steak and gravy, mashed potatoes and creamed corn, Dwayne asked. What else? Gotta love grandma's, Dwayne said, spooning ice cream into his mouth. Rich aroma of chocolate cut through the dust and polish smells. You got that right, Barry agreed. Yours does that incredible apple pie, right? Dwayne nodded. And cinnamon rolls. Thankfully, she only visits a couple times a year. I'd be stubby if she lived like yours, close like yours. How's your granny, Hud? Barry asked. You haven't mentioned her in years. She's still alive? Hudson nodded and grinned. I don't think she can die. Dwayne nudged Barry. You remember how afraid you were of her when we were kids? Barry held up his hand. Hey, I'm not ashamed. He looked at Hudson. What reasonable person wouldn't be afraid of your granny? He laughed. Hudson smiled and nodded. Only an idiot would cross her. Man, there was just a lot wrong with this Hudson guy. But what did they find? So, honestly, it feels like it's just it's like a story of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, I guess is the best way to describe it. And yeah, so I don't really know which way this is gonna go. But anyways, we read pages 143 to 160, and now pages 161 to 180. And I'm sorry if I sound a little more dead than the 5 seconds ago of me reading. In real life, it's been 20 minutes, and I've been running around, because my animals escaped, even though that should have been impossible, because they're all right here with me. But I have a second patch of animals, and they escaped because the person I'm working with didn't communicate that, oh, by the way, I'm letting them out. Which, fun fact, when I have animals, I need someone there watching them, not, oh, I'm letting them out, oh, I'm leaving. And then someone else I knew was driving by and was like, oh, they're all escaping, yada, yada, yada. Like, yeah, no, oh, they should be with them. Oh, no, they're not. So, yeah, that was cool. That was a fun thing to work on. Really killed my mood. But I do remember about the story. So, back to that topic. Yeah, so we are young. No, this story sounds like about a security guard going through Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and it sounds like, oh, my life is so hard, everybody hates me because of an incident I did. And it sounds like he was blamed for some kids dying at the original Fazbear's location. And, oh, the bunny is his dad or his stepdad or something. I don't know. I really don't know. This story is going to be something like that. That's just what I feel. I don't really remember ever reading the story either. I don't remember any FNAF story from FNAF 3, so this will be interesting. Anyways, next time we'll be reading pages 161 to 180. Super fantastic, wonderful day, y'all. Be polite, be efficient, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. No, that wasn't good enough. Hold on. Bye-bye.